Thank you, Mary. Excuse me. So my name's Sarah Marcus, and I'm located in Salmon, Idaho. I've been here about 10 years, an LCSW licensed clinical social worker for about 9 now. And throughout my time, I work at a small rural agency, and throughout my time here, I've just thoroughly enjoyed living in a rural community. And I am just so grateful to be able to be on a Zoom call with people from all over Idaho um, and outside of Idaho and Oregon. I see someone from Oregon. So yeah, thank you all for being here. This is pretty exciting. I was introduced to the community resiliency model about a year ago and was able to complete a trainer's training in December, and it was a 5-day training, and they offer scholarships. So if this is a program or a model that really resonates with you, I invite you to go to the Trauma Institute, the Trauma Resource Institute, and get to know more and become a trainer also. I'm just really, really happy with these skills and how they've helped change my life and pretty much everyone I come in contact with. That I have the opportunity to share these skills with. So with that being said, we'll proceed. The first hour is going to be interactive education, and then the last 30 minutes will be less structured, with some skills practice and opportunity for deeper questions. And so, like I said, I'm located in Salmon, Idaho, and our land acknowledgement, the Sacagawea, the Native American, was born in our community. And so that's always kind of a neat thing to highlight. The land acknowledgement highlights that the Agadika Shoshone-Bannock people were here historically. This resiliency and trauma-informed model highlights the importance of their core values: service, social justice, dignity, treating others with respect. This model is very much about the importance of humans and how we are all so uniquely different and worthy. So the different ways that this model can be used is through self-care. The goals for this are to highlight the resiliency model specifically in regards to emotional regulation, and then offer you skills to be able to notice when you're in your zone, and skills to help you when you're bumped up and out of your zone, which we'll get to. And anyone can do it. I have I use a version of this model with my 3-year-old and my 5-year-old, and it's really fun. So in the chat, I invite you to share different definitions or your own personal definition of resiliency, or if anyone would like to raise their hand and share what comes to mind when you think of resiliency. Ability to get through hard things, yes. Learning and growing through challenges, yeah. Being able to endure. Yes, thank you. And then obviously on the slide, it says, what's your definition of community resiliency? And so this model is very thoughtful in regards to thinking about each individual personally, and then also the broader community. The model was born out of a need for helping people navigate trauma. And this model has been implemented after earthquakes or difficult situations where people who are trained in the community resiliency model will go in and support folks who have experienced something hard or horrific. The ability to bounce back. Yes, thank you. And move through difficult emotions. Yes. Support systems that help you as needed. Yeah. Yeah. Resiliency is it's so individual, and also a lot of people have experienced it. Yeah. All right, let's see here. So throughout our activities of daily living, these are some ways that the model kind of highlights how we navigate resiliency and the ways we show up when we are able to access that internal resiliency. And so the compassion and empathy we have is very different when we come from a place of resiliency, the solution focused, individual and collective assets and strengths, embodied well-being. We have greater access to our optimism and hope, and are able to acknowledge individual and collective suffering. And so the other really important component of the community resiliency model, which I'll start calling CREM, is that it highlights the importance of the lens that we approach ourselves and people we interact with. And so these three boxes kind of highlight that lens, that the conventional approach historically is that people are bad and need to be punished. What's wrong with you? Why can't you manage your emotions? Why are you crying? As opposed to there was a shift in the last 20 years for more, and all of these are still present, but the idea is to focus more in on the resiliency informed. So then the trauma informed, which is very prevalent today in a lot of our social work circles and community circles, is awareness, and that people are suffering. And people need to learn how trauma impacts a child and an adult's development. And while that's true, it still kind of supports the what happened to you. And so this beautiful lens of resiliency is people are resilient. And being able to focus on what's right with people and how they survive hard things, how they bounce back, how they navigate those difficult emotions, how they access their support systems. So the key concepts, and this is, let me see, I have to push a few more buttons. These are interactive slides. So the resilient zone is, oopsies, I went too far. It's not letting me go back. There we go. Oops. Aha. Technical error. Deny. Okay, here we go. We'll just stick with this one. So the concept of the resilient zone is that, and if any of you are familiar, a lot of the information in this model is gleaned from other models and put together in a way that is, I think it's pretty easy to digest, in my opinion. I was initially really annoyed with the resilient zone when I was introduced to it, because it very much is the window of tolerance. But it also is the resiliency zone now, and I have nourished a much deeper respect for it. And I've also, in Salmon, Idaho, we have a beautiful river called the Salmon River, and it is one of the only wild and scenic rivers. So there's no dams, and it flows through this beautiful canyon that's actually deeper than the Grand Canyon, which is kind of a fun little fact. So anyway, the river holds a very special place in my heart. And I have really resonated with the resilience zone in a way that I've created this analogy for the river. So here we go. If you think about the resilient zone as a current, a river that is in its balanced flow, you'll have rapids, you'll have flat sections, you'll have rocks, you'll have holes and things that you have to navigate, but you're able to do it. And you might do it with a little bit of uncertainty or excitement or joy, but you feel capable and you feel able. And so what happens is when we have high water in salmon, there's logs floating, the water goes a lot faster, usually there's flooding. And so if we think about that, those things are also correlated, or can be compared to panic and anxiety, anger outbursts, being more irritable, feeling more edgy. And then we also have droughts, sadness, depression. And so the reason this model is so effective is it is the foundational knowledge for a person to really get to know their emotional regulation. And so through the skills that I'll be sharing in just a moment, we learn how to track what zone we're in. Am I in my resilient zone, also called the okay zone? Am I stuck in a high zone, or am I stuck in a low zone? And it's amazing when you start tracking the amount of times that you're bumped out of a zone and you may not even realize it, because humans are so resilient. We just keep going and we keep doing what we have to do. And it's really hard when we're not in our zones. It's so much more difficult. But sometimes we don't even have the time, or we don't create the time to slow down long enough to notice where we are and do some things to get back into our resilient zone. So that's exactly what we're going to talk about for the next bit of time. And this other amazing thing is that our resilient zones can become smaller and they can widen. And some days our resilient zones are just going to be smaller. If we have a lot of external stressors, if we have financial stress or partner stress, those things can narrow our resilient zone. But if we're able to use skills, take care of ourselves, increase our awareness, those things can widen our zone. All right. So being able to identify your zone. So I invite you all just to think, we'll kind of get into more detail. And I don't actually know why we're on that one. I kind of just said this, unprecedented times. And especially, I think a lot of these slides came out during COVID too. And obviously there's a lot of things that are still happening that are COVID-y. But just being able to really understand when your resiliency zone is impacted and what to do about it. Okay, so as we're looking at this, it also highlights common reactions during and after a stressful traumatic event. And so it's our day-to-day stressors are totally an impact, but then we also have really stressful things that happen, floods, fires, COVID, that impact how we function on a day-to-day basis. And so if anything's coming to mind right now, I invite you to share in the chat or by raising your hand what some emotional reactions you have when you are experiencing really stressful days or have something traumatic happen. And maybe pick one and share it. An emotional reaction, a physical reaction, a spiritual reaction. We have behavioral reactions, relationship reactions, and then thinking reactions. Yes, worry, fear of the unknown, wanting to shut down. Exactly. Isolation. Yeah. And I was actually crying. Yes, disassociating. Being able to know your reactions is one of the first steps to being able to be aware of when you're not in your okay or resilient zone. And so I was introduced to this model. I had just become, I was like a year and a half into being a mom of two. And I had never been someone who would yell. I didn't even know that I was capable of yelling at my kids. And it was really, really a hard transition going from one child to two for me while working, and my husband works a very stressful job. And so I started noticing that now that I have the context for it, that I was bumped into my high zone often. And my common reaction my heart rate would go up and I would feel very out of control, and I would yell when my kids wouldn't listen or were doing something unsafe. And so the other thing that really sold me on this model was that once I was introduced to it, I was able to start implementing them, the skills that we're going to get to. And as I'm like, I still yell sometimes, but it has been a very long time. And I'm able to notice when I'm bumped above or below and get back in my zone so much easier. Yeah. Lost appetite or crave sugar with stress. Yeah. Cravings are super common. Exactly. All right. And so, you know, we've all kind of been thinking about it for the last minute, but being able to be aware of very common reactions that happen when we are experiencing regular day-to-day stress, chronic stress, or traumatic events. This is just another example of that in regards to COVID. Yeah, I don't think well when I'm stressed either. Thank you. We're actually going to talk about that. There's so much information in this presentation. I really invite you to follow up with me after if you have questions, and to look into it more. But my hope is that you will have a few skills by the time we're done. So that's why I'm kind of going through this part pretty fast. But I think this slide is very important before we move on. We are able to identify the physical reactions when we're bumped out of our zones, but it's so important to also be able to identify the mental, emotional, physical, spiritual reactions to being in our zone and feeling connected to our well-being. And so just, yeah, I invite you to bring to mind something that really resonates with you when you feel connected to your well-being, and share it in the chat if you feel so moved. And so a little bit of history about stress and trauma. I see that Mary just shared the slides, which thank you for that. I'm going to go through these pretty quickly so we can get to the more interactive stuff. So as human beings, and we're going to talk about this too, there's a component, a slide in here, but just a little teaser. As human beings, we operate from a very instinctual place, and a lot of our reactions are biological. And so being able to hold the compassion for ourselves that our reactions are biological, instinctual, as opposed to weakness, is so important when we're looking at stress and how we navigate hard things. And so the spectrum of positive, tolerable, and toxic stress. So this is just a really nice visual to highlight that positive stress can, we feel it in our body. It's mild to moderate. A brief stress response increases heart rate, blood pressure, and hormone levels, and might help you get through something challenging. I definitely was experiencing a little positive stress at 11:50 today. And so that's, being able to notice when you're experiencing things, and what it's like in your body is part of the tracking that we're going to get into, I promise. And then tolerable stress, the time-limited stress response results in short-acting changes. Balance returns with help from support system or other interventions. And toxic stress is that ongoing and relentless stress response, and it's prolonged, and you don't really see a way out. And the toxic stress is the one that just depletes our bodies of the necessary energy and nutrients and vital life force energy that we need to function in a way that brings us joy and happiness. And a reminder, adversity is not destiny. So, we all come from different places and have different access to resources, and through support systems and learning, we can access things differently. So biology versus mental weakness. This is what I kind of touched on. Crum's focus is on the biology of the human nervous system. There are common human reactions to stressful and traumatic events that affect the mind, body, and spirit. And then also being aware that there are natural rhythms in nature. So we have seasons. It's important, especially in Idaho, to slow down a little bit in the winter. Our days are darker and they're colder, and being able to rest more and drink more tea can be really nourishing, and allow yourself to kind of engage in those rhythms and being aware of how it impacts our nervous systems. And so this model also is very they've accessed a lot of research on the importance of neuroplasticity. And so the idea is that our brains have experienced a lot of things in our lifetimes, and through using the skills and shifting our mindset, we can learn new ways of operating. And so just a good reminder, brain cells that fire together wire together. And the way that it kind of talks about that is tuning and pruning. So tuning, positive experiences can actually change the structure of your brain, and it creates new neuronal pathways. And so whatever we focus on, we create more of, and whatever we are able to not focus on or shift away from, our brain says, oh, I don't need that anymore. So it kind of prunes it and it will disappear. And so another way of looking at this, as we kind of hopefully get to the skills soon, is that it's like a garden. If you water your weeds and you leave them there, they're going to grow. But if you water your vegetables and your flowers, then they're going to grow. And so just increasing your mindfulness of what you focus on, and the science behind when we nourish our positive thoughts, we create more space for a more positive sentiment override. And when we nourish the negative thoughts, we create more space for a negative sentiment override. And it's all connected with how our body experiences sensations too. So our anatomy, the study of the structure of the body parts, and then the study of the functions within the body. And so this is all built up for tracking our first skill. And so tracking the autonomic nervous system, being aware that we have two we have the parasympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the sympathetic nervous system is the one that controls organs during times. Well, yeah, they both control things physically, but when our sympathetic nervous system gets triggered or is put into action, our breathing goes up, our heart rate goes up, our digestion slows. That one is so fascinating to me. Our body's just like, I don't have time for that. I need to run away from the bear. But when our parasympathetic nervous system is triggered, when we're able to use a skill, then our breathing decreases, our heart rate decreases, our blood pressure goes down. And yawning is very much associated with the parasympathetic nervous system. So I love this analogy. Apply your resiliency mask first, learning skills to stay in your zone to help others. And so today, this is definitely more for the participants. So thank you for being here. But if you do want to start sharing this model, this slide is for folks who may not have training specifically in mental health, or just if you want to share it with people, really, really doing it from a place of non-judgment, and really remembering that we're all doing the best we can. even when sometimes it's hard to like look at that. And so this model really highlights that it does not interpret or assume meaning. And so like we have no idea what people are experiencing. It gives the person time for sensations to develop, and it's very non-judgmental and observes and stays one step behind and does not direct. And so um, even for yourself, giving yourself the space and the time to really allow time to notice sensations, and to thoughtfully choose a skill when you can. Sometimes it's not possible. All right. So these are the skills that I've been talking about. The first one is tracking, and then we'll go into grounding and resourcing, and then we'll talk about gesturing, shift and stay, and help now. And the three that I'm really going to spend the most time on are tracking, resourcing, and grounding. And there's a 3-page handout on the website where you registered, and that one is the most effective. I would strongly encourage you to find a color printer and to print that one out, and to have it handy, because that has a really great, it's just a very simple outline of the skills.
Sarah, I just put it in the chat.
Oh, thank you, Mary. All right, so yeah, and this slide highlights, those are the three we're going to focus on. So tracking. Tracking is the foundation for helping stabilize our nervous system. Tracking is simply noticing or paying attention to sensations, to what is happening inside the body in the present moment. What we pay attention to grows. And also being able to highlight, like really noticing where we experience things in our body. And I've had a couple people highlight that this shame, this person who's experiencing shame kind of looks like Spider-Man. And then I also have a lot of people notice that happiness and love and anger are all very similar. So it's just pretty fascinating to see these, because they're not everyone experiences them like this, but these are common physical reactions. Oh, okay, well, actually, before we look into this one, doorways of expanding well-being. So one of the components of tracking are being able to sense and feel. And thinking is important also, but mainly we're going to focus on sensing and feeling when we're tracking. And so I went too far on the slides, but before we move on, I invite you guys, I just took my rings off because this tracking exercise is really annoying to me when I have my rings on because they clink together. So just something to notice. If you have rings, maybe take them off or leave them on. But for the next, just like a few breaths, rubbing your hands together like this. And noticing what you're experiencing. And if you feel comfortable, typing it in the chat or sharing. And just to think about too, that is the, what we just did is the foundational tracking exercise is just a really great way to track sensations. Different speeds and pressures provide different input. Calming. Yeah, thank you. Tingly. And being able to notice what your shoulders felt, and also just bringing the awareness to your hands. Thank you for sharing. So everything that happens together when we're tracking, so everything is so connected. understanding how the insula is part of the brain that helps the body and mind communicate to one another, and it reads the physical states of the body. So, the body sensations like pain and itch, temperature, or your hands rubbing together. It communicates to the medial prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, to take action to keep the body in a state of internal balance. Body awareness can reduce impulsivity to promote emotional regulation and clearer thinking. Um, and so the reason we learn how to track is that we have to be able to notice the sensations in our body to be able to do anything about them. And it's a surprising, even for myself, how when I'm experiencing heightened anxiety, I'll completely forget to check into my body because I'm stuck up here having a reaction in my brain. And I forget that I have an entire body that can help me regulate. And so tracking is just that. It's noticing or paying attention to what is happening inside your body at the present moment and determining if a sensation is pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. And then when you experience the sensation, sitting or staying within that within the sensations that are pleasant or neutral. So again, what we nourish grows. And so when we're experiencing an unpleasant sensation, being able to find a sensation that's pleasant or neutral and put our attention towards that. Water the pleasant and neutral sensations. And so tracking the nervous system release, like I mentioned, yawning is one of the most common ways, or a very common way, that when your parasympathetic nervous system takes back over, you'll feel your body start slowing down and you may yawn. It's a beautiful release. And so just unawareness, for some people, even sensing pleasant or neutral sensations can spark unpleasant or even painful memories. And so again, this is a pretty brief presentation with a lot of information. And so we can talk more about that at another time if you want. But also increasing our vocabulary for sensation words. And so being able to expand on when we notice the tingling. Is it warm? Is it cool? Is it neutral? And just being able to increase our vocabulary on the sensations helps us have a more intimate interaction with those sensations, which then can give us more information and help us calm down our parasympathetic nervous system more easily. Yeah, thank you, Kelly, for sharing. All right, so we did the tracking. Any questions? Okay, resourcing. So one of the best ways to learn how to develop your sensory vocabulary is through identifying a personal resource and then noticing sensations on the inside. And so noticing this group of folks, they probably have been friends for a while. They look pretty comfortable. It's a sunshiny day. They have pizza and community and laughter. And so now shifting to kind of thinking about a sensation or a resource that you find. And so I invite you all to choose a resource. A resource is any person, place, or thing, memory, or part of yourself that makes you feel calm, pleasant, peaceful, strong, or resilient. A resource can be real or imagined. A resource can be internal or external. And so I invite you if you have a piece of paper handy or notes in your computer to, well, maybe have those handy after. I invite you to close your eyes if it feels comfortable. and to notice a place, real or imagined, that comes to mind. And as you think of this resource, I invite you to notice what you see. And what you hear. Maybe even a smell. Something you can taste. And take a breath. And then notice any sensations in your body. And I invite you to take a moment and just jot it down. So the concept of the resource, well, yeah, I'll give you guys like 1 minute. Oh boy, it's going back. So the concept of the resource is to be able to utilize this to regulate, like initiate your parasympathetic nervous system response. And so I utilized my resource prior to this presentation. I was a little nervous. And so I closed my eyes and I imagined my resource. And it just helps bring in your calming sensations. And when we're able to use our resources regularly, like even every day, tie it into brushing your teeth or going to the bathroom or something that you have at least 1 minute of unbothered time and just like closing your eyes or leaving them open and imagining your resource and noticing the pleasant or neutral sensations in your body, you're creating positive associations with that. And so then when you're experiencing something a little bit more stressful, you can visualize your resource and it's a skill you now have. All right. I just realized it's 15-1. So I'm gonna probably skip a few slides to get to all the skills because those are my favorite part. And so this just basically said happy habits can be nurtured, acquired, or directly taught. And so here's some research. And I'm grateful you guys have the slides. So please, if I go past one quickly, you have it now. And I'm always a resource also. But just the beautiful research behind being able to access resources and how much it can help us. And so what we did while I was talking about the resource is that resource intensification, connecting your resource to your senses. All right. This one's nice too. Noticing tears. So being aware of tears are also a component of the parasympathetic nervous system, and they help regulate blood pressure, heart rate, and breathing. And so really nourishing tears, happy crying, sad crying, all the crying. It's a really, really important release for our bodies. All right. So the second skill is grounding. And grounding is exactly what it sounds like. There's a lot of information on grounding. Today, it's definitely becoming more popular. But my favorite way of just describing grounding is so simple. As you notice, as you're sitting here looking at your computer, notice what your bum feels like wherever you're sitting, whatever you're sitting on. You can even, I invite you to take your hands and put them. I have an office chair, so I'm putting my hands on like the hand rest and pushing down. So that is an example of grounding. And when we can feel stable and grounded and we have something to push on, it's another layer of being able to stay in our resilient zone or be able to get back into it when we're bumped out. And obviously grounding is also something that parents do to children. So if you work with kids, you can change words or call it earthing. I mean, everybody has feelings about things. So I invite you to, accommodate or update. There we go. Update the words that resonate with you. And so I think I just kind of blew past grounding fast too, but just being able to really notice what your body feels like in the chair or on the couch, and you can ground anywhere. You can ground while you're walking, noticing your feet. You can even imagine roots growing down into the earth. Yes, for me, grounding is best done walking barefoot outside. Thank you, Crystal. Exactly. So, especially I think everyone on here is coming into spring. And so with the grass is starting to get green here in Salmon. And so walking around outside barefoot is a really great way to ground. But if you're stuck in an office on a Zoom conference, you can also do it in your chair. And so gesturing and spontaneous movements, the basic component of gesturing is I invite you all to put your hand on your heart and just notice that sensation. Ooh, and as we're talking about this, I noticed Mary just put my email in the chat. So the chat goes away after this. So please save that. Or yeah, I'm sure you can find me, but that's my direct email. So that makes it easy. So going back to sensations or the gesturing, gestures can be self-soothing. And really important. One of the ones that I do regularly, and I was just doing it a little bit earlier, I put my hand on my thigh and I kind of just move it back and forth, and it's comforting to me. And so noticing what gestures you already do that bring you comfort and creating a nice routine with those so that when you get bumped out of your zone, you can use them. And I don't know if I guess yeah, raise your hand if you've watched Ted Lasso. It's one of my favorite shows. Or do a little like the hand thing. Yeah. And so there's a scene in there's a character named Rebecca, and she is so if you've watched it, now I'm embarrassed because I'm probably going to remember wrong. She's the owner of the football club, and in one of the seasons, in one of the episodes, she shows Keely, this other character, how she does a gesture, and Rebecca will stand up on her tippy toes and put her hands up in the air and do this I think it's a roar. Now I'm forgetting, but her gesture is so wonderful that she does it before a meeting, and it makes her feel bigger and stronger and embrace her power in a really, really neat way. So, if you haven't watched Ted Lasso, it's a high recommendation. If you have, hopefully that scene comes to mind. Oh yes, a hiss and a growl. So yeah, such a good show. All right. And so, yeah, there it is. I forgot I put that in the slide. So you guys can see powerful. That's Rebecca underneath the powerful.
Sarah,
Yeah.
you do have a couple of hands raised.
Oh, okay. Do you have questions, or were you saying you've watched Ted Lasso? If you have a question, unmute. I might have messed up the system. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Okay. Here's some more examples of self-calming, release. And then universal spiritual gestures, prayer. And so, yeah, think of a gesture that you already do and maybe one you want to add to your toolbox. Did that. Man, again, I have too many slides. Sorry, everybody. So the nutshell version of this is that our brains um are so powerful and regulate so many things. And the hand model, Dan Siegel, if you haven't seen it, I strongly encourage, there's lots of YouTube videos. But we have the survival network, our instinctual. So, like, if we think about this as our brain, our hand is the brain. And if we think about like a bear comes in and our body goes into fight or flight. And then we're bumped into our sympathetic nervous system. And then we have our limbic area gets lit up and we have an emotional response and we run away. And so those things help to protect us instinctually. The people who were able to access those networks and get away from danger reproduced. And so it was a very necessary component of survival. But it gets in the way nowadays because we're always perceiving threats that may not be that are potential threats for sure, but aren't helping us regulate our systems. And so then the top part, accessing your cortex, your prefrontal cortex, is your thinking network. And so being able to use these skills, knowing when you're in your resilient zone, being able to use a resource, visualize your resource, visualize or do a grounding exercise, do a gesture. All of those things help us get back to access our logic and reasoning. And so it's so important to be able to understand how our system truly works and work with it, because so many times we get stuck in emotional reactions and we forget or aren't able to in that moment to create a pause between getting triggered and reacting and responding, which we can only do when we're able to access our cortex and the thinking network. Okay. And so here's an example of flipping your lid. Okay. I'm going to go through a bunch. Another really important component if you interact with other people, anxiety is one of the most contagious emotions. And so being aware that if you're around someone who's experiencing anxiety or if you're experiencing anxiety, we have mirror neurons. And this can also be described as co-regulation. And so when we're around other people, we can pick up on their emotions. And if we're not aware of our resilient zone, and it's so much easier to be able to stay in our resilient zone when we can use a skill and not have that other person's emotions throw us off balance or throw us into the high zone or throw us into the low zone. Because these mirror neurons are very real. And if we are in our resilient zone, it's so much easier to respond and to not like get triggered. And so these are the common survival responses. But before we run out of time, because I know we have until 1:30, but I'd imagine some people have to log off at 1 for lunch breaks. So again, you have these slides, so I'm gonna skip ahead to our help now skills. Ta-da. Okay. So the help now skills are when we're hit and we're bumped out of our zone and we can identify it. Being able to do one of these skills helps us remember that we can resource, that we can ground, that we can create a pause to respond. And so drinking a glass of water in the winter, one of my favorite things is to go outside and put my face in the snow It sounds horrible, but it is so effective. Thank you. Um, and count backwards from 20 as you walk around the room. Another one that's super helpful, and maybe I'll just, ladder breathing. And so what you do is you count from 1 to 20 while breathing in, and then you count down. So 1 to 20, and then 19, and then 1 and 2. And so you inevitably alternate your breaths with your counting. And it is one of the most regulating activities I can do for myself. And it is such a gift because it's instant. And you'll notice you'll find yourself on 30. Sometimes I find myself on 100 because my brain is so busy doing other things, and then start back at 1. But ladder breathing is also, and it's not one of the creme skills, but it's very effective. So name 6 colors. So just mindfulness, being aware of something you're seeing in the room. Paying attention to anything that catches your eye. So if you're feeling dysregulated, finding something you can look at and noticing things about it. Like I've got a picture on my wall that has a flag and a sail, and there's a dark cloud behind it. So notice the temperature of the space you're in. And temperature is a pretty impactful one for us physically. And so once you notice the temperature, if it's dysregulating, then try to do something to adjust the temperature. Touch the surface of something in nature. And that one too, like if you're a pet person, going and giving your cat or dog a pet is so regulating. Most of the time. Sometimes it cannot be. If you're inside, notice the furniture and touch the surface, being aware of textures. Notice the sounds of the space you're in. Pushing your hands or back against a wall. I was also, when I was introduced to these skills, I thought that one was so silly. But I do it pretty often now. And it's one of the ones that it just really helps kind of encapsulate and get you right back in your body. And if you notice like the texture on the wall, I haven't done my back, but I do my hands pretty regularly. Notice the texture, notice the color. It's very regulating. Walk around and pay attention to the movement in your arms and your legs and your feet making contact with the ground. And so it's all about regulating and mindfulness. And so when stuck in the high zone or the low zone, a help now strategy can help you get back on track. Oh, excuse me. And so all of these are just the help now strategies again. And from here, I'm going to invite you to, there is a ground like a tree activity in the handouts. It's one of the other pages that are on the website. So for the folks that are sticking around, I'm going to do the grounding like a tree. And then I want you to, so for the folk, I'll just give you guys a plan though. It's 1 o'clock, so a lot of people have to go. Or some people might. I invite you to stay though. I'm going to be here for another 30 minutes. I will do the grounding like a tree activity a little bit longer. And then we'll practice noticing what zone we're in. And then I'll kind of, I'll open up for questions, and then I can do a review. So yeah, so thanks for sticking around if you are still here. I invite you to either stand or sit in a comfortable position. And imagine your feet firmly planted on the ground. And now I invite you to notice roots digging through the floor, through the rocks and the soil. Through the water. And these roots can reach all the way into the hot magma center of the earth. And now I invite you to bring your attention to your legs. And you notice that they're strong, that they have bark growing on them. And you feel grounded and stable and balanced. And as you bring your awareness up, you can put your hands in the air or just imagine it. And your arms are beautiful branches covered in leaves of whatever tree comes to mind for you. And as you notice these leaves, you also notice a breeze. And your leaves are rustling in the breeze. And your branches are very slightly rustling. But you notice how strong and immovable your trunk is. And now I invite you to recall the resiliency zones and think about where you are in your zone. And maybe even ever so briefly think about where you were when you sat down for this presentation today and see if there's a difference. And then come back to this sensation most likely. And I invite you to share it in the chat. For me, this activity is always a really good reminder. Nice. Thank you, Mary. That we can slow down even when it feels like sometimes we can't. And to notice how regulating being grounded can be. And to also notice how much your leaves rustle and how strong your trunk is. And then you can even expand it into thinking about things from your day, and noticing what moves your leaves. And gosh, some things might make you feel uprooted, and how to get your tree back and get those roots nice and deep again so that it can be nourished from the water and the nutrients from the earth, and then also feel more stable. Feeling of smoothness and calmness. Nice. Thank you, Letitia. So for those of you that have had the availability to stay, that I guess, I don't know, do you want to recap or do you have questions? I have one more activity that I can do, but I'm open to questions if anyone wants to unmute. Okay, let me go back. I'll do the quick recap. Let me see. Going back with this slide is let's see here. Oopsies. Yeah, okay. We'll just go all the way back to the beginning. Oh, yeah. Okay, maybe we won't. Oh, I don't have to go into there. Okay. I'm having technical difficulties. So, but the main idea is that if you've stuck around this long, experiencing the opportunity to, so say when you leave here, you are, so I'll kind of do a recap and then we'll do another mindfulness activity. When you leave here, if something dysregulating happens, being able to track. So starting with the top of your head and kind of noticing where a sensation is happening in your body. And then the next step is to, if it's an unpleasant sensation, being able to notice what area of the zone you're in. Are you in the resilient zone? Are you bumped up or are you bumped down? And if you're not where you want to be, then practicing a resource, grounding yourself, or help now skill. Oh, and there's actually one more skill that I did forget about. It's called the shift and stay. And so I might actually just go to that one. So the shift and stay is kind of oh yeah, we're not going to go through all the memories. The shift and stay is a really, really nice skill. Because it highlights all of the ones that you've already done, but it's a really great reminder that the more you use your skills, the more effective and strong they will be. And so, and when I say strong, it doesn't mean that life's challenges aren't going to stop surfacing. It just means that the way that you navigate those challenges will be different when you're in your resilient zone versus if you're bumped out. And so shift and stay is truly just choosing a skill and practicing staying there, which can be a lot more difficult than you think sometimes. And so being able to notice what you're experiencing, identify when you're in your zone, and use a skill. And these skills have also been extremely helpful for me while interacting with other people. There was an incident the other day. My dog was at the dog park and another person's dog kind of came up and snapped at him. And I noticed immediately that I was dysregulated and I was able to get myself back in my zone and make sure my dog was okay. And then I went to talk to this other person and they were extremely dysregulated. And so instead of taking their dysregulation from the awkward dog interaction personal, I was able to kind of navigate the situation respectfully and then move on and not take their behavior personally, because I could see very easily that they were very much in their high zone and very reactive. And so, especially as a couples counselor, one of the most important skills that every single human being needs to practice daily, myself included, is being able to notice when you're dysregulated and use a skill to get back into your regulation in a way that helps you access that logic and reasoning to problem solve and navigate the world in a much more pleasant way. Okay, questions? It's pretty straightforward. It's also a lot of information. And that's actually one of my favorite things about this model also, is that it is fairly digestible. And so if you share it with other people, oh, and if you interact with children, like an idea is to say, instead of what are you noticing, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, you can choose butterflies for pleasant, moths for neutral, and bees for unpleasant. And so my 5-year-old, when he's feeling upset about something, will be like, Mom, I feel bees inside. And I'm like, okay, let's shift. I was like, what do you notice if you think about butterflies? And so kind of encouraging him to shift to something pleasant if he's experiencing bees. And then obviously if there's something we need to talk about, we can too. So with that in mind, I'm actually going to invite you to um choose a stressor in your life right now on a scale of 1 to 3. Um, and if this backfires, I'm available to private message, or I can go into a breakout room with you. If something not backfires, but like if you experience distress that you feel is unmanageable, please reach out. But I invite you to choose a stressor that's 1, 2, or 3 of a scale of 10, and just bring it to mind. And then do a tracking exercise with that, like issue or memory or something unpleasant, a 1, 2, or 3, and notice what is unpleasant about it. And then I invite you to scan your body for a pleasant sensation. And when you find that pleasant sensation, or maybe even neutral, sometimes we can't always find a pleasant sensation, but pleasant or neutral, I invite you to give that sensation a color and give that sensation a weight. And give that sensation a texture. You can even give it a smell. And then invite that sensation, the pleasant or neutral sensation, to grow into whatever size feels still pleasant. And then maybe do a self-soothing gesture to kind of close. And track where you are in your resiliency zone. Are you in the middle, high or low? And then also briefly touching base on the unpleasant sensation that I asked you to bring up, just real quick, and noticing if it's any different now that we've strengthened a pleasant sensation. And so the concept there is that we have positive associations. And when we nourish and put our awareness and our attention to pleasant and neutral sensations, um, uh, potentially even while you were doing that, pleasant memories came up. And unpleasant ones are also possible. But the theory is that when we nourish pleasant memories and sensations, then we have greater access to other pleasant memories and sensations in our lives. And the same is true for unpleasant sensations. And so being able to kind of choose how you navigate those things, um, and really being mindful of when we're thinking negative thoughts, or if we're experiencing negative sensations or stress or worry, being able to consciously create space to use a skill to get ourselves back into our resilient zone. If you've enjoyed our time together today, I'm also, like I said, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, and I'm trained in the Gottman method. And I am my first ever couples river retreat. And so we're going to go down that main salmon river that I mentioned earlier. I'm going to take 5 couples down the river for 5 days, 5 nights, and 6 days. And it's August 15th. So if you were curious about this, I'm going to be teaching CREM, the Gottman method, and different ways of connecting with your partner to create greater connection. And so that is something that you can access on my website if that is of interest to you, or maybe someone you know. I really, really appreciate everyone's time today. And please reach out with more questions. And if this model resonated with you, the very brief bit of information that I was able to share, it flew by so fast. Please do look more into it. They have amazing scholarships because they want more people sharing this information. The more the happier people of our world. And they also have an app. It's called iChill. Let's see, also near the end. iChill. I'm trying. There it is. They have this app, and it's free, and it goes over all of the skills in the developer recorded audios, so you can just turn it on and listen to it if you're having a hard time regulating on your own. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm going to put that link to the iChill app. I'm just put it up in the chat.
Thank you.
And does anybody have any questions?
I was just wondering, like, so when we have, because I work sometimes with older youth as well too, but when they're in such a high state, like they're on that high zone, like, is it just giving them the time to kind of come downward before they actually would put into play one of like the exercises, or what would you recommend? Like, how do I get them in that such a high zone?
And it's a youth?
Yeah, they're usually, the old, like, closer to like 16, 17, maybe 15.
Okay. So in a perfect world, I would encourage education of the help now skills in advance. And then when they're in their high zone, the first most important part is making sure that you're regulated. And then when you approach that person, you could model a skill or invite them to try a skill. Very limited dialogue when people are in that very reactive, sympathetic response. Their logic and reasoning is not online. And so as long as you're safe, again, there's so many factors, but as long as this person is escalated emotionally and not going to attempt to harm you, you could go up not try to touch them, but very close and do a skill, or offer a glass of water. They might, again, be very thoughtful of which skill would fit that person, and then maybe offer a couple of them. But the most important thing is making sure you're regulated, and then trying to educate about the skills before anybody's bumped out of a zone. Was that helpful?
Yeah, definitely. I really like it. And so with your contact information there too, is it, so I work for an agency. So would they reach out, like if they, I don't know, like into having with any training as well? Because I know this is done here through the Institute, but to reach out to kind of help with other staff members that are working primarily with youth, they are youth in care, in foster care. And so I think all of this, I mean, I'm sure, there's just a variety of trainings, but I really like this. And also just because, again, too, for oneself to utilize. And I think this is wonderful for me as well, too. And just sometimes working with certain families, like I definitely started feeling my heartbeat fast. And so I'll take away a lot from these exercises and kind of implement them. But would your contact information then just be something where one would reach out to you or
Yes,
to the website?
absolutely. Email me. So we have two trainers at my office, and we can travel, but this model is very it's gaining a lot of people, and so there are a lot of trainers. So please email me and I will respond, and we will touch base, and we can figure out how to come and train your agency, or find someone who's closer. Where are you located?
In the state of Idaho here in Caldwell. So
McCall.
Caldwell. But
Caldwell. Oh,
I think,
okay.
yeah. And so
That's
like
not
close to like the Paya area too, where we have like another center, for the youth. And so, but it's like 30 minutes away from here from the Caldwell office. So
okay. Yeah, we could definitely talk about us coming to train. Caldwell's, I don't know how far it is from Salmon. It's a ways, but it's not. Yeah, we'll definitely talk. And my the other trainer here at our office, Carly and I are starting to we have a planned training to go in and teach all the teachers the crumb skills this fall before school starts. And we taught a bunch of teachers in a little town called Ledor a couple weeks ago. And so like my dream is that everyone can have access to these crumb skills. So yes, I look forward to talking to you more about that.
and I downloaded the app and I like it. And the three languages, the English, Spanish, and then I don't recognize the other language, but it's awesome that they have it in three languages. That's amazing.
That last part I couldn't understand.
Oh no, I was just saying that on the app, I really appreciated that it's like in at least two other different languages, and Spanish being one, just because like with me primarily, like in working with some families, is Spanish. So
Wonderful. Yes, it's been translated. Yeah, the iChill app is a couple, and then they have pamphlets in a lot of languages. I can't even remember the number. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a question for Sarah? Okay, well, once again, Sarah, thank you so much. That was a great presentation, and I certainly got into my zone more than once during it.
Yeah.
I want to remind you all that you will get an email, a thank you email with a link to the survey. And we really appreciate you filling it out. Like I said before, it only takes a couple minutes of your time. That'll hit your inbox in about an hour. And tomorrow I'll send an email with all the links from the session because there were a lot of good ones in there. And if you have any questions, you can direct them to that Empower Idaho email. Maybe one of my, I can see Eden already threw it up there in the chat. And the slides and recording will be available on the website by early next week. Thank you all for attending and have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
There's lots of nice things in the chat.
Yeah. Hi, Kelly. Hi, Greta. It's so fun. Some of my dear friends and my sister and